Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cheeky Scientist Radio Show. I'm Isaiah Henkel, a Cheeky Scientist, and we have a great show lined up for you today. We are going to start with the Show Me the Data section. We're going to go over some data that looks at what PhDs want in their career, what they experience when they transition out of academia. We'll talk about some of the challenges, the struggles, and of course, we'll talk about the overall theme for today, which is the biggest missteps that PhDs make in their career. We have several guests on with us today. We're very lucky to have Jim Gould, the postdoc director at Harvard Medical School, on with us. We'll be introducing him after the Show Me the Data section. We also have on Sarah Rodriguez, who is working in industry as a consultant. We'll talk about her career path. And if you are an associate, we will be bringing you on as well. We'll be bringing you on as well to talk about, it will be bringing on associates to talk about their struggles in their careers too. Had some background noise there, but I think we got it figured out. So again, if you're just joining us, welcome to another Cheeky Scientist Radio Show. Something we've been talking a lot about this week is interviewing. A lot of PhDs, they're still learning the interview process for industry. Now, when you're in academia, you learn to explore all of your options. You learn to be, to never be too certain about your data, for example. But certainty can work to your advantage when you're interviewing for a job. You do not want to display uncertainty. You do not want to be acting as if you're exploring lots of different options, as if you could change your mind on a whim and go back to academia, change your mind, and sure, take another job at that same company, or sure, go somewhere else and stop working for them after a month. What they're looking for, if they're going to extend a job offer to you, most of all is certainty. You want to get into that career because you're perfect for that role. You've been waiting your whole life to work at that company, not other companies. One of the most common things that we hear in our association is, well, I don't want to come off desperate. I don't want to seem overeager. What? Yes, that's actually exactly how you want to seem during the interview. You want to seem enthusiastic, and enthusiasm is the second most important thing next to certainty. Right? Of course, you have to have the skill sets, the substance, etc. But when you're there in person, if you're not enthusiastic about the position, if you're not certain that you actually want it, it's a non-starter. Nobody's going to extend you a contract for tens of thousands of dollars and do that from a place of uncertainty. They're interviewing you to become more certain about you. So you have to go into it with that level of certainty. And, as PhDs, sometimes we get too literal. And we're like, well, what if I am exploring other options? What if I'm not certain about this job? Focus on what you are certain about. Every position, right? Every company has pros and cons. So focus on the pros and why you'd prefer to work for that company over any other company, right? So the pros that company has over other companies. You have to practice this certainty. You have to practice having it come across. When you hear people tell you to be confident in your interview, it's not so much being confident about yourself and who you are, that's part of it, but it's being confident about your ability to fulfill that role, to you exuding that you want that role. The enthusiasm part, you have to show enthusiasm. It starts in your face, subtle lift in your eyebrows, nodding, active engagement in what the other people are saying. Like you've been, again, waiting for years, like most of you have, to get this job. So make sure you're doing those two things. They might seem like minor points, but it's the area that we hear from employers that PhDs fall short the most. You have the technical skills, you have the transferable skills, project management skills, right? Time management, organization, etc. But are you certain? Are you showing them that you can deliver? Are you engaged? Are you enthusiastic about the job? All right, so with that, I'm going to show you a couple of things. I'm going to share my screen, so we'll make sure that is working. And for those of you watching publicly, we've been getting a lot of questions about where you can go to sign up to learn more about the Cheeky Scientist Association, where you can go to sign up to get all of our free materials. You can go to phdsgethired.com. If you're listening by audio, that's the easiest way to find it. Otherwise, you can see the URL here that will reroute to cheekyscientist.com/association-learn-more. You put your name and email here. We'll send you weekly updates about how you can transition into your first or next industry job. Make sure you also go over to the Cheeky Scientist blog, just cheekyscientist.com/blog. Look at the blogs that we have out every week. We have multiple blogs out each week. You don't have to search anywhere else online for career articles if you're a PhD, because every week we put out a best of transition article that scrolls through all of the different articles that came out that week on everything from networking, CVs and resumes, interviews, transferable skills, academic blues, industry positions, business acumen, and more. And it ranks all of them in terms of the top articles that came out. And there's a great article that I want to point all of you to that is aligned with today's theme of the biggest missteps that PhDs make, 5 mistakes that prevent PhDs from getting hired and how to fix them. These will go into some of the topics we'll discuss today, but if you go to cheekyscientist.com/blog and search 5 mistakes, you'll be able to find it there. So with that, we're going to jump into the Show Me the Data section. Before we do, though, I'm going to bring on Mary on the full screen. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Isaiah.
How are you? If you can see and hear Mary, can you say hello, Mary, in the chat box, please?
Hello, hello.
It's good to see Mary on. Mary is somewhere in Europe, yes?
Yep, Denmark.
Denmark, that's right. Well, thanks for joining. Please say hi to Mary if you haven't already. Looks like everybody can see and hear you. So I'm going to share the screen again, and we'll jump into the Show Me the Data section. So if you're joining us for the first time on one of our radio shows, we always like to go through some data, we're PhDs after all, on the topic that we're discussing today. So all of you should be able to see my screen. If you could type in screen, if you can see the Show Me the Data section, we will go through it. I'll try to make it a little bit larger here for those that are viewing in one of the groups. That should be a bit better. So why are PhDs leaving their postdocs? Factors that influence the transition of university postdocs to non-academic scientific careers and exploratory study. There's a ResearchGate link here that we'll put in the post show notes. And what we're looking at is a simple table. So we have 3 columns, rationale, and then original, and then current. And under rationale, there are 3 rows to obtain a tenure track academic research position. So originally, 86.6% said this was their rationale. This is why they were in their postdoc. Current, 54.6. And then the other 2 rows, and we'll talk to Mary, who I need to move over there so I can see you. Hello. Preparation for specific non-academic career, 7.2% stays the same. And then holding pattern, will not pursue an academic job, goes from original 6.2% to 38.1%. So Mary, what does this table mean, and what trends are we seeing?
Yes, I think people start their postdoc, a lot of them, or 86.6% of postdocs start with the idea that they're going to obtain a tenure track position. And then that shifts over time to whatever the current rationale is. So you see that they decide they won't pursue an academic job. So we see that shift.
Yeah. Quite a big drop. I'm surprised that, I want to know who these 7.2% of people are, that they do a postdoc to prepare for a non-academic career. That's interesting. We'll have to talk to Jim about that. I wonder what's the deeper rationale there, and how they think that's going to help. And perhaps it's for maybe they're looking for a principal scientist position, or a career like some companies do. Well, very few, maybe like a Genentech or something.
But I mean, we hear a lot in academia that you need more experience, or people have the feeling that they don't have the right experience or enough experience just with the PhD, right, to get hired in industry. So I think that's what it's touching on. And I have to actually say I'm surprised it wasn't higher, because we hear that so often from people. How am I going to get hired? I just have a PhD. I don't have experience, but actually they do. So.
Yeah, and I think that misconception's really been broken down over the last few years. I mean, we've seen the data from Nature, and that specifically Nature Biotechnology, showing that the people who do a postdoc, they never catch up to those who don't in industry. Holding pattern, will not pursue an academic job. This is fascinating to me, is how this doing a postdoc can become a holding pattern that people will stay in. I don't understand it. You did a postdoc yourself. Do you think it just kind of like sneaks up on you, and then you just get used to weighing and exploring your options, or what insights do you have?
What insights? I mean, I was definitely on the academic track. I've been interviewed for faculty positions. And, you know, I had two-body problem, things changed, but along the way, I was less confident about staying in academia. But, you know, and even knowing people that got hired as MSLs, I worked with postdocs. I started a postdoc association. I think it's sort of, sometimes it can just take time to let go. I mean, you've been in school your whole life, right?
Yeah. Take time to let go. So the pain has to get bad enough to finally let go.
Yeah.
This next figure, this is from a Nature survey, which found only 15% of respondents were able to obtain useful career resources at their institution. It's just interesting to see. I mean, I like the figure in terms of, and for those of you listening by audio, the question is, how satisfied are you with the following? And there's two sets of bar graphs. On the left, how many people were not satisfied, on the right, how many people were satisfied with each of these things. The first five are at about up to a 50% level of satisfied. So with your PhD overall, degree of independence, ability to present research at conferences, guidance from advisor and lab, teaching duties. And then it starts to shift in the other direction to not satisfied with funding availability, vacation time, benefits, number of publications. And then at the very bottom, the most amount of people reported here, at least for what they're showing, were not satisfied with career guidance. And this was something that there was a complete lack of. And I think still, if you're at a university that has even a moderate career guidance, you are a select few. Still, it seems to be getting better, but I don't know, Mary, what do we hear about the most in terms of a complete lack of guidance, some materials, occasional seminars?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, a lot of this is prepared by people themselves who have been in school their whole life, right? I think a lot of it is connecting with people in industry to even know what the possibilities are. I mean, I think there's more effort being made to do that, but I mean, you'll talk to Lisa on the team as me. We both worked on the Postdoc Association. I co-founded one because there was nothing for postdocs. We couldn't even identify who was a postdoc at the university, let alone connect with them and figure out their plans and get them some support. So I think just, not a lot of resources have been put there, and
yeah.
And
I think, I mean, at my university, they wouldn't even bring in people that were in non-academic positions. They said that during our departmental meetings. There wasn't, I think they said there wasn't funding for it, but there was funding for bringing in academic people. So it's just it's an interesting problem, and we'll be able to talk with our guests today about it. But moving forward, there's another survey here. This is a satisfaction survey from Nature, and the question that was asked is, what is the biggest challenge to your career progression? Now, this is interesting because this is people being polled who are currently in academia. So what do they see as their biggest challenge? And if we asked all, any of you that are here in attendance, anybody watching on any of the live streams, you're probably going to say academic things, right? And that's what this shows. So if you want to walk us through the different rows or bar graphs, Mary?
Sure. 55% of the people polled said competition for funding was the biggest challenge they faced. And for me, that's quite surprising. I mean, I guess, I don't know if that relates to competition for funding by the PI so that their position can continue or so that they can do research. But yeah, it's again, it's within the academic setting. Funding is what people are focusing on. And I would think it would be something else, right? Now that on the other side, right? It's like, what can I do? And what are the steps I need to take to do that? And how can I do it? So it wouldn't be funding, but there are, to be fair, 40% of people said lack of jobs. So there's an awareness, lack of networks, which I completely agree with. Even going to conferences, a lot of the time you're networking with other academics, which, can definitely be helpful, but there just seems to be kind of like a barrier between academia and industry. It's this other side that people aren't aware of or don't reach easily. And then, other challenges, all the way down to language skills. So there's a whole range of challenges to career progression, but.
Yeah, and I would say all of these challenges have nothing to do with your ability to get an industry job. They might spur you to getting an industry job, but what this always brings up to me is priorities.
Yeah.
Most of us get stuck for that same reason you mentioned previously in that academic mindset because you've been in academia your whole life. And so you're prioritizing based on what academia prioritizes. What's your biggest problem? Oh, lack of funding, not publishing enough. I'm not enough papers, right? It's like, well, what do you actually want to do with your career? And you'll have a lot of people say, well, I want to get out of academia into industry. And then you ask those same people, what's your biggest concern right now? And they're like, funding papers. That has nothing to do with you being able to transition into industry. And so getting them to shift their mind, your biggest problem should be, finding even more time to network, right? Growing your industry credibility, increasing the number of informational interviews that you're doing per week. So you really have to change your mind. You have to focus on what you want first in that goal, and then you can figure out how to get there, and that will expose your actual challenges, not just the challenges that everybody around you is facing. I love this last study. So this is on a site, tandfonline.com, tandfonline.com, but the study is great. And what it found is that both exhaustion and cynicism were statistically significantly decreased from the final year of study in academia to the first 2 years of work. And then professional efficacy, self-reported, increased as well. So a lot of PhDs ask, well, what are things going to be better on the other side, right? Will I be less exhausted, less cynical? Will there be a rebound? Is everything eventually going to make me miserable? Will I get to use my skills more, right? Like, will I actually elevate my skill set? A lot of people think if they transition to industry or somewhere else, like, oh, I'm not going to be doing real science or real engineering. My professional status is going to go down. And so this study was pretty fascinating, and it's a three figures that are very simple. We're going to look at all of them show the mean of something on the y-axis. The first one's exhaustion, and then a measured time point in terms of 1, 2, and 3 years. The final, with 1 being the final year of study, 2 being the first year of work, and then 3 being the second year of work. So when looking at exhaustion, what does this graph show, Mary?
Well, it shows that in academia, in the final year of study, people are pretty exhausted, and then it drops significantly in the first year. To be fair, it does go back up a little bit, but not quite as high, or nowhere near as high as it was in when they were in their final year of study. So there's this perception, I guess, or maybe it's not a perception, but that industry is tiring, or that things are harder on the other side. But actually, if people are less exhausted, that's a pretty good sign, right?
Yeah, and if you focus on the trends and don't nitpick the the values on the y-axis or whatever, do the normal academic thing, but this is something we consistently see in our group, in the association too. From thousands of PhDs who have transitioned, the exhaustion does go down, but there is a rebound, which is important, right? No matter how slight this rebound is, you have to understand that if you're going to push yourself in your career, you might get more exhausted later on too. Like, it's not, the challenges don't disappear. We do see a huge relief during that first year. You get into industry, new things are happening, and then, right, the challenges come back up. But generally speaking, they do not rebound as much as they were in academia. Depends on the institution, of course. Cynicism, same thing. I would say this is where the biggest relief occurs, and I'm speaking more qualitatively in terms of the association. But the graph here is looking at cynicism on the y-axis, measured time point, and you see a big drop, and it rebounds a little bit as well. So cynicism, what do you see in the association, Mary, with people talking after they get that first industry job?
I don't know, relief. They're more positive, more optimistic, right. Just happy that it happened, wishing maybe they got there sooner. But yeah, just they feel they're in the right place.
Yeah, and I think this is something that certainly I would say even more than exhaustion, because exhaustion is, you can get exhausted in industry for sure. And we do see people really challenge themselves when they get into new roles. Like Mary mentioned, medical science liaison roles, management consulting, it really depends. But the cynicism, I think in academia, a lot of people, they go from, they get taught to be critical of their data and critical of the research in a healthy way to being critical of people, critical of everything that they see, right? Critical, like we experience it in chat boxes on a lot of our public webinars. People get super critical over every little thing or person, or they're not getting what they want, etc. It's because that kind of negative academic, I can only show that I'm intelligent if I point out something negative, mindset comes up. But then they get into industry and everybody's working as a team. It's a much more positive environment. They're not fighting for, the scraps of funding, et cetera. That cynicism tends to go away. And they're like, oh, I can actually be, we even see that when people come in the association, like, oh, people can support, like we're not all tearing each other down, which is pretty cool to see. Now, the last figure shows efficacy. And this is self-report. It's like self-efficacy, your professional ability, your ability to get things done. And what I like about this is you don't see a similar rebound, right? So if you're just looking for the trends here, and again, this is certainly what we see in the association, is that your efficacy goes up. You feel better about yourself, you're more respected, and you gain a level of healthy confidence that allows you to actually do better work than you were doing in academia. And by far that is the case for the majority of people who transition. And it could be because they have access to more funding, better equipment, or they're working with a team like towards actual milestones that are set for them instead of it, being kind of a carrot held out in front of you that's moved, having a moving target. Stuff like this, which allows you to focus on, your professional skill set. I would say, especially in R&D, Mary, and maybe you can, talk about some of the things that you hear too, but especially in R&D, we think a lot of people, they think that the research is somehow going to be worse in industry, but then they find themselves doing better research and doing it faster, yes. Right?
Yeah. I mean, it is faster. There's a team, there's a whole process, there are deadlines. Doesn't mean you're working 1 million hours a week, but just things move really quickly. And so you can look at all you've accomplished in a short period of time and how that contrasts to academia, which I think is a big confidence booster. And to have the support to do that and to know you're part of moving something forward that, could help patients or whatever the goal is.
Yeah. All right, Mary, thank you very much. Please thank Mary for joining us from Europe. Great to see her on. Thanks for staying up too. All right, so we're going to move right forward. Very excited to bring on our first guest, James Gould. I'm going to show his bio here, and then we're going to bring him on. So this is Jim. He is the director of the Harvard Medical School and Harvard School of Dental Medicine, Office of Postdoctoral Fellows. And he's implemented research, career, and professional development programs and policies for HMS trainees since 2011. I think we met for the first time in 2013, shortly after that. Jim started a seminar series, some of the things we're going to talk about, that he's just done an incredible job, not just at Harvard, but I would say really being on the leading edge of developing PhDs in their careers. He's spoken and published on career and professional development topics in a variety of forums, locally, nationally, including articles in Nature Immunology, covering CV and resume conversion, interviewing strategies, manuscript writing. He's been a guest blogger and a steering committee member for Nature Jobs at its Career Expo, a mentor of the National Research Mentoring Network, a guest speaker here several times, a Cheeky Scientist, as well as BioCareers. Prior to working at Harvard, he completed 2 postdoctoral fellowships at the National Cancer Institute of the NIH, where he chaired the Fellows and Young Investigators Association, interned with the Office of Training and Education, and also found time to study cancer metabolism. He is a member of the National Postdoc Association, where I just saw him at their conference recently, gave an incredible talk, an incredible clinic, which we'll ask him more about when he comes on, and the Graduate Career Consortium and AAAS. He received his BS in biotechnology, and you can find him on LinkedIn. Let me click here. Might have had it pulled up already. Right here. So if you haven't connected with Jim, I highly recommend that you do. He's always posting great stuff, always speaking, very, very active. And our oldest in terms of going way back to 2003 person that we've ever interviewed, and we've done a lot of collaborating with Jim, always learning from him. So it's great to have Jim with us. Let me make sure I can get him on here. I think that should do it. There we go. Jim, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. Let me hide the... So great to be on. Yeah, it was 2013, right?
I think so, yes.
And that was the summer series of...
I think it was a leadership series, maybe?
And I think did you start that at Harvard?
Yeah, it was something that we were trying to develop, understanding what gaps in programmings we had. And one of the things that kept coming up from the postdocs was, we need to know what leadership is and how to do it.
Yeah, and I remember, so it was the very first talk that I gave under Cheeky Scientist was with Jim, and he did a great job. He even mentored me. He was like, well, let's tone down this a little bit, maybe change the topic here a bit. But it was, it's interesting. And I can't believe it was almost 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Pretty incredible.
So yeah, it's been a while. And I guess I am one of your oldest colleagues, but I'm not that old. I think you might be actually older than I am.
In terms of age, yeah. I was correcting myself. I was like, wait a second, I'm aging myself because, and I think, what's been interesting to me is to see your trajectory and everything you've been able to do and the clinics you've put on. And, thinking about the first question, I was really excited to ask it because I don't know if we've ever talked about it. Like, what was your path? Why did you decide to get into helping develop PhDs, to even go beyond that, to writing so much about it, and to putting on these clinics? Why do you do what you do, and how did you get into it?
So what do I do? It's always been something that I've done, even when I was a young kid, just helping others. I wasn't perfect or a saint, but I was always willing to say, hey, what about this? Because one of the things that I've found is I've made all of these mistakes that you were talking about on Cheeky Scientist, that you were talking about with the previous speaker. I've made all of these mistakes. And if I'm not learning from them, I'm helping other people learn before they make these same mistakes. And, as an undergraduate, as a graduate student, and as a postdoc, I was helping my fellow students and postdocs figure out their larger issues, whether it was an interpersonal issue or conflict with their faculty mentor, or it was maybe a personal issue, but not so much. But how do I apply? What's my approach? How do I reach out to people? I've always been a people person. Again, I've made all the mistakes, and hopefully I've learned from most of them. And it was very fulfilling, knowing at the end of the day, I helped this person or I helped these 3 people. And compared to my research, I would maybe do one successful experiment a week, maybe a month, and it wasn't enough to sort of keep me going, keep me motivated. But I knew I had to finish my PhD, and I knew I had to do, the next step as a postdoc, and we can talk more about that. But it was really the people aspect of my research and interacting with smart people and them helping me figure out, my research issues as well as career and professional development. But it was really fulfilling to do that. And I found that I had a nice natural, tendency to be helpful rather than harmful and giving bad advice. And I found it very useful. And I ultimately realized I could do this for a job. The next step was actually convincing myself and then my wife that it was worth still getting my PhD and it was worth still doing a postdoc, but I would be transitioning into sort of a research adjacent type of position, helping people do their research, because, going into doing a PhD and a postdoc, like, oh yeah, I'm going to cure cancer. And I quickly realized maybe it's not going to be me, but maybe I can actually help someone realize their full potential by removing some barriers, or at least raising their awareness of some barriers that might be harmful to their research. So again, it just comes back to, it was very fulfilling. Then I realized I could actually do it for a job.
So that's fast. So in grad school is when you first were like, I want to help develop careers.
Yes.
Wow.
It was mostly, I need to develop my career.
Yeah.
I knew if I had an issue, many others had the issue.
Fascinating.
And, began exploring how to do that, talking with faculty. Thankfully, there were very sympathetic faculty saying there's more out there than just academic research, and became involved in developing a biochemistry student group for my department, became involved in recruiting students and, just developing myself to help develop them.
Amazing. I didn't know that. And so, and it's part of your development now, you put on clinics, all around the world. And these clinics allow you to interact with a lot of PhDs and postdocs, not just at Harvard, but elsewhere. What has come up for those clinics for you? I mean, I've seen you kind of change the way that you do them. What are you responding to in terms of the frustrations from PhDs, the trends of those frustrations of postdocs?
So one of the reasons I came up with the career clinic model, which covers CVs, resumes, cover letters, interview preparation, statements of teaching philosophy, and the academic research statement for academic job search, is I would meet with postdocs one-on-one, and each and every one of them had the same questions and issues. So I decided why not put them in a group and teach rather one at a time. I could teach 20 at a time. And not only me teaching or leading discussion, it's 20 postdocs coming together and helping as peers, mentor themselves and each other. So it had a sort of a feed forward effect where I wasn't doing this 20 times, I was doing it once, and I was teaching them how to take critique and write for other people to read rather than writing their materials so only they can understand. And the other aspect is they're much more willing to read and critique other people's materials. So there's more of a peer mentoring aspect to it, and I don't have to teach it 20 times. So that was the initial evolution of trying to develop these career clinics. But one of the biggest issue that I see, even in these recurring series, is that this is usually the first time they've ever pulled together an application. So they don't know where to begin. They don't know why write a cover letter and what goes in it. What do I need to have on my CV? What's the difference between a CV and a resume? And what does a consulting resume, how is that different from an industry resume? So they don't, as I've said before many times with you, is they don't know what they don't know. And what I begin to try to do is help them understand best practices and dispel some of the myths of what they find on the internet, or what they or maybe a colleague have had a very maybe poor singular unique experience, and trying to tell them actually that's not how it really works. So just demystifying the process.
And so I want to dig into that demystification. Obviously we're talking about the biggest missteps today. So let's just start with what's common. What are some of the most common mistakes? You mentioned some things about resumes, but the things that you find yourself repeating every clinic.
They're not sure how to sell themselves. So a common mistake might be they're framing their experience in the wrong way. And as you said earlier in the program, they still have this academic mindset where they haven't really thought about the skills and activities that they've done and taken a step back and trying to understand what they mean in the grand scheme of things, rather than I understand CRISPR to its fullest extent. It's what skills do I bring and what have I done to communicate those skills? They don't know, like I said, they don't know what each component of the process or application does or means. A common mistake is that they don't ask questions. They think they're on their own in this process. So every time I do a career workshop, I thank them for being there and taking the time to take an hour or 2 hours to think about this. because they're so focused on just doing their research that they leave the details of career transition and job application to the very end, which is the biggest mistake you can make.
Yeah, and it's always fascinating to me how after you hear the same frustrations over and over, you're just able, and I've seen it with your clinics, you've really tightened the ability to deal with those up front and to dig into some of the deeper issues that are really holding them back, like you said, like the mindset things. And that's what I wanted to talk about next, was the less obvious mistakes that people are making. Like you said, you don't know what you don't know. Some of the PhDs that are listening right now, what are some mistakes they might be making, or some of those misconceptions they have that they don't even realize, like the real deep-seated stuff that's holding them back?
So, some of the mistakes they make are being too focused on the wrong things. They're focused on negotiating offers instead of actually submitting applications. They put the cart before the horse, saying, what if I have to, negotiate 2 offers? And I say, you actually haven't submitted an application. They think about, really a hyper focus on publication rather than skills. Publications are important. They show productivity. They show that you are a collaborator. They show that you've actually done and built a track record of successful science, but it's not the only thing employers are looking for. They worry about the automated systems for resume reading rather than networking. So they're worried about the wording or formatting of their materials rather than talking with people who are on the other side of those hiring systems to really understand what these positions mean, what they're looking for, and understanding the language of whatever career transition you're looking into. I have a whole list here. They don't talk to their faculty mentors. They don't have an open and honest conversation. Sometimes they don't feel that they can. Yeah. So you should be developing that relationship early and going often, ideally talking with your faculty mentor about sort of the evolution of your career and professional development while doing as good a research as possible.
I want you to do the whole list, but that's always a big one for a lot of people here. What do you recommend if they just are dead set? And I know you've had people come to you and say, I just can't talk to my advisor. There's no way. They'll kick me out of the lab, or it'll ruin the relationship. What have you had situations like that? Do you recommend anything?
Absolutely. The first thing I usually say is that actually true? Yeah. Have you actually had this type of conversation? How have you gone about bringing it up? Have you tried to engage them as a mentor, saying, I'm thinking about this thing. I haven't committed to anything. What are your thoughts? Sort of bringing them in and sort of asking lightweight but probing questions about it. And then you can get a better sense of, well, they're going to be supportive, or they're going to be agnostic, or they're really going to be not helpful, or maybe even antagonistic. So if they're purely antagonistic, or you think they're going to get zero support, which is most likely not the case, is you don't have to tell them anything about your career transition or your process until you have an offer in hand. You just need to make sure that you are still working as hard as you can on your research, and that it's not, your job search isn't detrimental to the work you're doing right then and there. So my first question is it a fact check? Actually, have you actually tried this? Yeah. And then if it's an extreme situation, you don't need to really disclose until you have something in hand.
Perfect. Thank you.
So continuing on my list,
yes.
One of perhaps the biggest mistake, but it's very subtle, and I keep pushing people on this, is we get questions all the time, is what if they say no? What if it's in an area that it might be a stretch? So what they end up doing is they select themselves out of opportunities before they've even applied. So my advice is to let them tell you no. Apply as broadly as you can, be as open-minded as you can, realize that you're never going to be 100% fit for an application or a job advertisement that's written out. So apply, network, talk with people, but never select yourself out. There are jobs that are obviously not good fits for you. And you can focus your efforts a bit more wisely. But if you're ever in a question of, would I be, is this worthwhile? I say yes. Why not? It's going to take you an hour maybe to recraft and tailor some materials. but apply. Let them tell you no rather than you selecting out even before you've tried. And then you can always say no later at the interview process or even the offer.
Perfect.
Let me see. Again, they're a bit too narrow in the way they think about their skills and experience. I'm only this. I'm only a cell biologist. I'm only a computational biologist, rather than thinking about how their skills are transferable across sectors and fields. They write and submit application materials with no critique from anyone else. So they often have those spelling errors, grammar errors, or errors of context, where they only understand the materials they write instead of what other people write or understand. And, and I quickly reviewed your blog before I logged on. One of the things is some of them don't have an online presence. I asked, do you have a LinkedIn profile? No. I was like, well, right after we meet, go and do this. And I give them a handout, because we bring in speakers on, leveraging LinkedIn. We bring in speakers on just about any topic you'd like to learn about. They don't have a presence outside of their immediate lab setting. So there's a whole—
What an incredible list.
thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's a whole blog right there. And I just want to note for everybody listening that you heard it from Jim at Harvard. The focusing on that niche background is one of the biggest limitations to your job search. Like Jim said, the skills you have are cross-functional, transferable, and not considering that it can really be detrimental. So I really like that one, Jim. So I wanted to ask you too, I always like to set up something practical at the end, and this question came from our team. So I wanted to say, imagine this scenario. Somebody comes in, I'm sure you don't have to imagine very hard for this. Somebody comes into your office, their lab just lost funding, and they're out of a job at the end of the week, right? Let's say there's a spending freeze, whatever happened. They haven't done anything in their job search. What would you tell them to do to start? What would you tell them to do in the next 24 hours?
So it's actually happened. Unfortunately, I actually had a postdoc this morning who wasn't in as extreme situation, but her lab is actually moving, and she was still trying to figure out whether that move was good for her personally as well as professionally. So I encounter that maybe all too often. But the three things that I would say to do in the next 24 hours, or at least immediately, is: one, don't panic. You're not alone. And what resources do you have? So that's the first thing. So, good decisions don't come from places of fear. So make sure you're not panicking. Realize that you have an infrastructure around you, whether you recognize it or not. You have maybe friends or family. You have an office like mine, or career services, or, perhaps in the department, but you do have resources at your fingertips. At least explore those immediately. The second thing I would say is to reach out to your network, reconnect, and begin asking for meetings. Can we have coffee? I have a situation that came up, kind of suddenly. Is it possible to get on your calendar in the next couple of days? And ask them for advice, and perhaps even ask them for leads. Don't ask them to do your job search for you, but ask them, have you heard of anything? Or do you know of any other people I need to be talking to? But definitely reconnect and reactivate your network, because unfortunately it has happened, and many people do have experience transitioning quickly. The third thing I would say, and even though you asked what in 24 hours, you still need to be thinking long-term and midterm. So what is actually your transition timeline? How long do you actually have before you need to transition? Is it a week? Is it a month? Here at HMS, if you have been terminated, you get 3 months. Wow. Some places it's longer, some places it might be shorter. But work from that timeline, work backwards, and then finally I say, how can I help? So reaching out, asking for help, that's what you need to be doing.
And I really like I really love that word reactivate when it comes to your network, because a lot of you think you don't have a network, right? But your network is not just, anybody you can think of who's extended you a job in the last week. It's it's very likely just a dormant network of secondary or tertiary connections on LinkedIn or otherwise. And like Jim said, just have to reactivate it. There's probably somebody in your network right now who can get you a job, certainly your alumni networks. So it's incredible. We're really grateful to be able to have someone like Jim at, one of the world's most prestigious, if not the most prestigious institution, pushing this stuff forward. So I hope you all connect with him. Jim, I wanted to ask you 2 quick questions, if you're up for it, that are a little bit off script. I'm always curious about what do you think the fix is? You've seen the trends in academia and in industry where PhDs are going for their careers, the postdoc system. Do you think there's a fix? Is there anything exciting or novel that's been explored on any of the committees you've been on that you could share with us?
So I was actually just discussing this last week. I don't know if there's one single fix to any of the postdoc training issues, or even maybe the PhD glut, if that's what you want to call it. But I think there needs to be sort of a reframing of academic education and training from graduate school into possibly postdoc, going back into redefining what master's programs are, because many PhD programs, or many people who go into PhDs, really might only need a master's. But there's so much work involved in the master's that they just kind of default and say, I might as well get my PhD. The other thing is masters cost money. PhDs are usually free, at least in the sciences, because they're paid for by grants and the institution. So we need to figure out how to pay for research intensive masters and give an exit strategy out of the PhD possibly, because not everyone who wants to do and continue into research, even into industry, needs a PhD. So, that's, when I was an undergraduate, I realized, if I get a BS in biotechnology, molecular biology, what does that mean and where can I work? I might as well just go ahead and get a PhD so I can be kind of in control of my own career. And that, there were 2 default steps: defaulting into a PhD program and then defaulting into a postdoc program. As the earlier speaker said, it's just sort of a holding pattern. I need to have time to figure out what I'm doing.
Yeah.
We need to have exit points in the PhD program, or at least the postgraduate programs in masters and PhDs. We could consider postdoc tracks. We can have an industry track. We can have a academic faculty track. We could have a teaching track. Some places do it, but not on a larger scale. And having those types of tracks, even within the same lab or faculty's lab, it could help those conversations happen that aren't happening, talking about career and professional development. I need this type of researcher skill or this type of professional skill in order to transition in 3 years rather than waiting and figuring things out over 8 years. So that is sort of an idea that career and professional development, even vocational, even that might be a bad word, thinking about education and training as a vocation rather than I have a PhD, the world is at my fingertips. No, we need to think about what we're actually going to be doing and how to transition, effectively, and how to get jobs, because at 35 years old, postdocs should not be facing an application for the first time.
Well said. Great line to end on too. I'm really grateful that Jim and there are very few like him that are on the inside who can actually make some of this change possible. I continue to learn a lot from Jim in terms of his approach. You can tell one of the most polished approaches ever to helping PhDs get into non-academic careers. I don't know how you walk that line, but you do an incredible job.
Thank you.
Thanks for sharing. Great to see you on, Jim.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
Please thank Jim in the chat box if you haven't already. Excellent interview. And we went a little over, but it was definitely worth it. So really grateful to have Jim on. And I know we'll see him again soon.
All right. Thank you, Isaiah.
Thanks, Jim. Bye. All right. So one more time, please thank Jim if you haven't yet. And we're going to move right on in. I want to make sure we have time to talk to Sarah Rodriguez. I'm going to show her LinkedIn profile here. So Sarah is one of the very first people to join the association and get hired through the association. I think in our founding year, she came in, she was maybe the third ever. And this is, you know, thousands and thousands and thousands of members later. Very excited to have her on. She is currently a consultant at Elsevier. She's had multiple other jobs. She's worked at Agile Bio, CEA, in terms of her academic background. Very, very excited to bring her on and talk about her career track and how she got into it and what she does. I know some of you have been considering working for different journals or publication companies. You've considered being consultants and doing things that are off the bench. Sarah is a great person to talk to, and I'm going to bring her on. That should allow her to start her video. And we will talk with Sarah. I can hear
Hello.
her. Hi,
Hello,
Sarah.
everybody.
How are you? If you can see and hear Sarah, okay, can you say hi, Sarah, in the chat box, please? Thanks for joining us. Thanks for staying up. Good to see you.
It's fine. It's just 8 p.m. here.
Okay, not too late. Not too late.
No.
So yeah, so it's been a while. I know you've had a few careers now, a few different jobs in industry, and I'm excited to hear about this one. Can you talk a little bit, just help us understand what you do and who you work with?
Sure. So, so before joining my current company, I worked as a business developer at a small company, Agile Bio, and data management, basically. And then I joined a company maybe you know of, Elsevier. So most people know about the publishing of Elsevier, but actually Elsevier, it's more an analytics company going through this transition from what's content and what we can do with data evidence decisions.
So more data management, right? So you're more on like the analyst side, and you're looking at like consumer analytics, I'm guessing.
So yeah, so in my job, I get insights for internal insights. So some insights that they are based on consumers, but also insights to the customers, to the return on investment. Also doing workshops, national trends, and analysis of a bunch of data that is on the impact and publications of a country or an institution or department.
And this is fascinating. I love what's happening just in the last couple of years. Like if you see jobs that end in analyst or consultant, you can be sure that you can get it, right? Even or researcher, like we hear a lot about user experience researcher, customer consultant, business or analyst or consumer analyst. You're looking at data. It's data analyst, management. You have to have experience collecting it, et cetera, but it's on the market or how customers are responding to stuff. It's to help guide decisions in terms of like Sarah said, product development, business development. It's an exploding field. It's like data scientists is kind of splitting, and there's like the data scientist positions where you need programming languages, but then there's data scientist positions where it's more about data analysts, like analyzing data, and those are going into these other job titles and types, which is good news for most of you who don't know programming languages. You can get into these. So what do you love about your current job, right? I mean, what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
So maybe it's a very much cliche that we don't have like a routine. So, but what I actually like about it is we have a range of programs, tasks that we do. So sometimes I am over my Excel doing a presentation on how the return on investment and opportunities, maybe gaps, etc. And the other day I may and a customer face-to-face, or doing a workshop, or doing bigger events to institution. So I guess it's a like a perfect fit for me that likes that data analysis, but also likes to have not just like code data analysis and delivering it, but also have this face-to-face with the customer and public speaking side as well.
That's amazing. Yeah. So it's it's very similar to what a lot of you have done with data. You've collected it, or, you know, maybe you're not collecting it yourself, but you're finding out where the data is and you're collating it, and then you're analyzing, looking at trends, and even presenting it. So again, it's a great career track. And can I ask a little bit about how it's structured at your company? What departments do you work with the most? Is it sales and marketing, product development, business development? What cross-functional departments are you interacting with daily?
A lot. So we are like most of the big companies, like in a matrix structure. So I work with different marketing departments, could be the regional, but also global product development. Sometimes also technical support to support the sales and part of the sales team actually, also the business development, the business developers. Sometimes we have collaborations on key data, and yeah. So we work like collaboration is key, and the more you collaborate inside the company, the better it's viewed. Let's say so. No, it's not working silos, doesn't work usually in the industry, even more in a matrix where this is could be a really a threat. So collaborating through different departments, and sometimes departments that you haven't heard about. It's and be able to jump on sometimes last minute projects as well.
Yeah, and sorry. So she's talking about the matrix hierarchy, right? So I was going to show a couple people how that is, right? A lot of us think of hierarchy in terms of flat or vertical, but you're saying you work in a matrix hierarchy that's driven by the projects, correct?
Yes.
And that's basically what it is. So like the hierarchies really divided up by the projects and how they intersect with the different departments. And so there's a good image here. I was going to try to pull up very quickly because I think it's something that a lot of PhDs have no experience with whatsoever. This should show the full image if you can see that. Right. So this is a matrix hierarchy where you have project leaders or projects, and they're intersecting with different departments. Of course, it can vary, but that's how things are structured. So instead of the hierarchy being based on the people, it's driven by the projects and the departments. It's pretty fascinating. I just wanted to mention that very quickly. Thanks for bringing it up, Sarah. I wanted to work backwards now to talk about how you got into this role. And maybe you could tell us how you got into it, and then what people could do if they wanted to get into it. Like if you could go back in time and maybe what you would have changed to make your candidacy even better.
Yeah. So one of the things James was talking about was the narrow mindset. And this is so true. I come from oncology and hematology, so who would know I will be working with multidisciplinary data. Sometimes I have some things on medical side, but sometimes I have things, other kind of data and other kind of metrics that I had to learn. But as a PhD, you can learn very fast. So a thing that I could have done earlier was to not try to fit a job to what I have. So I have a PhD, so what kind of jobs are there for PhD, but really list what I like to do and what I see myself doing in long term. So I've done this map like 5 years ago, so the third ticket to join. Yes. So it was about traveling, giving lectures at conferences, and today this is also part of my job, although it's not everything, but I'm doing this. But then it's not. That's awesome. Yeah, sometimes we are also thinking about just the next step. So the next step, I was not traveling so much. My first role was a step closer, but was still not ideal. But I think also it's important to have this long-term strategy. Maybe your next step it's not going to be the perfect one, but you have to understand why you're doing it, to leverage what kind of skills so that can better prepare for your second or third step.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. And so Sarah's talking about the transition plan where you go through and you figure out your professional lifestyle first, and then you fit a job to that. And a lot of you are like, I don't have time for that. It's too theoretical. But if there's real value, because if you can figure out what you want to do on a day-to-day basis, it's easy to find a job that'll fit to your professional career. But kind of picking and trying to choose the job title first can lead to some pretty big mistakes. If you could go back and talk to yourself, 2 years ago, or somebody who's trying to get into this role now, I know you touched on it a little bit. How would you tell them to prepare? What transferable skills would you tell them to gain or to communicate?
I think would be on presentations, presenting yourself, having elevator pitch ready, know how to sell yourself, because this is what you're going to also be doing. So you're going to speak with customers from data that you have analyzed, etc. So it's important that through your interview, you demonstrate that you are in the handle of this also. I think analytics is very easy for PhDs to show, but sometimes in a CV, we can drag on project on protein A that I discovered, whatever, gene B, C, D, and in industry, I don't care about it. For me, it's more attractive if I see in your CV, I analyze gene set data, and I took this to make this kind of decisions, or I published this article that demonstrated this and that in a very lay way. I don't need all the details, but instead of just going to the deep of the science, to take a step back on how better to sell the skills that you have now to the positions that you want. And as a PhD, I know sometimes it can be hard if you are just starting to do it, because you again, the narrow mindset, I just do flow cytometry, I just do in vitro cell culture. Sorry for the examples in biology, but this is where I come from. And then you're trying to fill in vitro culture and flow cytometry into job titles. So all those skills also have other transferable skills as data analysis, and communicating your projects into different assemblies to experts, which is very hard. Not all people know how to do it or how to face difficult questions either.
Fascinating. No, that was incredible. Thank you very much for sharing, Sarah. It's great to see you, and I'm always impressed with your career success. Thank you.
Thank you, Isaiah. Bye-bye.
Please tell Sarah thank you in the chat box. Great advice. I love it, because Sarah, she just gets it. She hit on every single, some of the biggest misconceptions that we all have when we're coming out of academia. Some of them, a lot of you are dealing with those misconceptions now. So hopefully after hearing it from Jim, hearing it from Sarah, you can start to wrap your head around it and get excited about these new roles for PhDs. Again, analyst, consultant, researcher, start to key in on those key words. You can get into those positions no matter what PhD background you have. We have humanities PhDs that are getting into user experience researcher and different analyst positions because you know how to do research. Even if it's not with hard STEM data, doesn't matter. Most of the population cannot do research the way that you do, where you'll dig into a topic and then look up and 2 hours have gone by. It's a very rare quality. Leverage it for these new jobs. That takes us to the end of the public portion of the radio show. Great to see you on. Incredible show here. Please thank our guests if you haven't already. The audio version of this will be available on our podcast in a couple of weeks. If you go to cheekyscientist.com and you sign up on our website, or if it's easier to remember, PhDsGetHired.com, PhDsGetHired.com. Sign up there. We will send you information on our podcasts when they come out. You can selectively choose if you want updates on podcasts or blogs. I send out job tips weekly, just a text form email only of my personal job tips, no links, nothing promotional whatsoever. You can sign up for that as well. Hopefully we'll see some of you on the list. I'd like to send you those job tips. If you have any questions, you can ask them wherever you are watching this. We have a team there. So if you're watching us on Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're watching, we're here to help you. And we hope to see you in the Cheeky Scientist Association soon.